In today's video, I've got a really fun surprise for you that is what many would consider a white whale game. So that game they've been searching for a long time. And I'll go into a little bit more about what all that means. But if you're new to the channel, my name is Bruce Brown and I am the host of Board Game Impact. So I have a very big passion for gaming. It's given a lot to my life, and what I am also doing on the side is I'm also studying for my PhD in human resource development. So what I seek to do is to help advance the hobby by bringing some more of a scholarly approach and breaking down experiences, different games, so that way you can make informed decisions for yourself and your gaming group about what games you might want to partake in or look into, just to try and help the hobby, which has given me so much. So like I talked about, in today's video, I've got a fun game that has been out for a long time. It's been out for several decades. And in looking at some things online, I've seen this game go for hundreds of dollars. And I've also seen this game found at Goodwill for $4. Or some of you might just have it up in your attic and just might not be the wiser. And I wanted to do this game today because it's a game that, although it is out of print, and many would like it to come into print again, there's just some copyright things there who retain the rights, but it's a game that you can still find if you look out for it. But it is for many, like I said, what's called a white whale. And where that term comes from is the text Moby Dick. So in Moby Dick, which starts off with "Call me Ishmael," Ishmael is searching, he's a whale hunter, he's a way different time of the world, and he has this white whale, and he goes through all sorts of trials and tribulations, and sorts of things happen on his ship with his crew, but he is just driven almost a little too far to find and for him kill this white whale. And so for many, the term white whale has come ubiquitous with having that thing off in the distance that is something that you would love to get your hands on, but it always is just like falling through your hands just at that last second, the last opportunity, or is just something you keep searching for, and it's just the treasure you keep not finding, but you're still on the hunt. This is one of those games, and for me it is no longer a white whale, but it's a game that I had been looking for a while, and it's a game, the reason it was for me in that category was the fact that for a lot of people, it's been one of two things. It's been a game that's just a lot of fun, a game that brings back some thoughts of nostalgia, a game that some might want to do with their kids to kind of help bring them into gaming. But for me, it really came down to it's a game that inspired a lot of other games. This game brought in some new things that honestly hadn't really been brought back out until more recently, and although some say the rules could definitely use an upgrade, I agree. It's got some things in there like rolling and moving, similar to Monopoly, which just the game hobby has evolved since then. But the core of this game is still really, really nice and a lot of fun, and I've had a lot of fun playing it. And yes, although it is super rare for some, I do of course want to take it out and play with it, because what's the point of having a game if you're not also able to engage? But I also of course set some expectations like, hey y'all, this is a really important game to me, just please be careful, but I want us to have a lot of fun. So you can do that with your players, don't hesitate. If there's something that's really important to you, a game that's important to you, or if you've had to work your tail off and you got that game and you just want to preserve it for as long as you can, don't hesitate to say to your players like, hey, this is something that's really meaningful for me, please treat it with care, treat it like you owned it, but wanted to preserve it, because you don't know how they would handle things if they owned it and what their collection's like. But don't hesitate to set those expectations, but also realize that people are going to be playing your game. Okay, so that was a lot right there. So let's just jump right into it. So the game, my version of this game actually is from 1989, which probably TMI, but I'm just going to tell you, this game came out, this version at least, when I was 1. So I was 1 year old. This is not my original copy. I believe my brother had a copy who's older. We just haven't been able to find it, so maybe there will be a second one in my future, because some people do combine sets. But this is a game that I picked up about a year ago at Board Game Geek Spring, what's called the Board Game Bazaar, virtual flea market. And so the game, without further ado, is HeroQuest, a game by Milton Bradley. This game first of all, I'm just gonna put up this art for y'all. So this game, HeroQuest, is very, very unique for what it was, as it came out in the late 80s and really pulled in some of the tropes that you would see in Dungeons and Dragons, which came out in the early 70s, is really taking a rise right now. So it's had different waves over time, but man, Dungeons and Dragons is killing it and really just making an impact. But that experience of having somebody dungeon master a game, and then the players going through their dungeon and unpacking treasure and fighting things, is also the experience you get in this game, which is really, really cool. But we haven't really seen those things come out until recently with some games, but this was doing it since the late 80s. There have been several different versions of this game. So there's a UK version, so United Kingdom, there's a US version, there's different languages, because Milton Bradley is huge, right? But also there's been expansions, as well as what's called Advanced HeroQuest. Now, if you notice, it says the HeroQuest system, and that is because part of the game you can also design your own adventures for your people. And so let's actually get into it and show you what's going on in the box. And so first of all, with many games from back in the 80s, 90s, they typically put some things on the inside of the box. And HeroQuest is no different. However, what they put on the inside of the box is actually how to construct different pieces of furniture, which I'm going to be showing you here in a second, that come with the box to actually make your experience even that more immersive for your players. So let's put that off to the side real gentle. Okay, so I told you that one player takes on a dungeon master role. And so they need to have some hidden information, because they're going to have a screen. Well, they have a screen, I'm about to show you that, but they have pieces of paper that outline what's going to be in all the different parts of the dungeon. And so that way they know in advance the story as well as what's going to be happening. But here is the Dungeon Master screen. And so this little thing is awesome. So this is pretty ubiquitous also with playing Dungeons and Dragons and other things, because this is helpful because you can hide some things behind it. But also, on the flip side, it's a cheat sheet for that person as they are creating and curtailing your experience, and trying to give you the best experience they can. And so how the game works is one person is playing this Dungeon Master-esque role, or Game Master. In this game, that person's actually called Zargon, and they're an evil sorcerer, right? That Zargon is not always present in the game, but this person takes the role of Zargon, who is then using Zargon's minions to do things. And so all the other players are actually working together in a cooperative thing. So you really have this one person trying to really bear down on the players, right? Because it's a more scripted thing. But everybody else is working to complete the objective. It might be to slay the gargoyle, and I'll show you the gargoyle, he's pretty cool. Or it might be to rescue someone, or it might be to just get some treasure, or just to explore. And so what's going on is on a hero's turn, so I'm going to explain how it all works. On a hero's turn, they can either move or take an action. Now, I already said that is movement by rolling dice, and then you move. But you can move or act and then move. And there's a whole bunch of different things you can do as the hero, between casting a spell if you happen to be a wizard. This is like a barbarian, not going to have much going on besides like brute force. But if you have a wizard, they can cast spells, barbarian can't. Also, they can like search for treasure, search for secret doors. They can also search for traps or disarm traps that they have found. Now, after their turns, you're going to have the Dungeon Master's turn, Zargon's turn. And so they're going to be controlling a bunch of different monsters, and I'm going to have miniatures for all of this because this game also comes with miniatures. And they're going to be able to control things like the goblins or the skeletons, zombies, orcs, or some of the others. And what's nice here is they actually have a breakdown of how many movement spaces, because they're not going to roll to move, how many movement spaces each of those can do, the attack dice they'll use, the defense dice, the body points, and the mind points. So the body points are like, how strong is this thing and how much damage can it take? And the mind points are how smart is this thing? And so if there's a trap or there's some other things going on, or if there is something that happens within the dungeon that affects people of a less mind point, then it's going to take effect on them. Or if they're smarter, it's like a skeleton is dumb, right? It's just skeleton. And a zombie, they're trying to eat brains because they don't have brains. But some of the other things, they might be smarter. So if you look, 3, the Firmier is a lot smarter, and so it's going to outwit some of the things that you're trying to do. And then it has a quick combat summary on the side. Okay, that's a lot on that, but that thing is really outlays how the game plays. And so I already told you that the person who has that role is going to have this really cool little quest book. Now how this works is it opens like this, and it actually has the map. And so yes, like, don't look too close at this, just kind of look at it, but they'll have where everything's going to go, so the stairs to get into the dungeon, as well as where to populate all of the different furniture, which that's just super cool. And then on the bottom it actually has a description of all the different rooms, what's going to happen, what they're going to lead the players through. So that's why they also have that screen, and also so why this book opens like this, so that way they can hide behind it and not give stuff away by having to go like this and look. They can just go like this and look over, which is nice and very intentional. Of course, there is also a rule book and a how to play. So it's the instruction booklet. I think the art on this is kind of cool, and I also like the fact that its age is showing, and so it's getting that more yellowish tint. I just think it's really cool. And so this book is laid out really nice. The font's really good. It goes through everything about what makes HeroQuest unique. So it says right here, it's a game for 2 to 5 players. So you can play this 2-player, or one person is Argon, the other person is the heroes. Now, in that case, that person might want to be more than one hero, because it's really hard to do with one. It's not uncommon for characters to die, but it also walks through like the character sheets, how everything works, but also a glimpse into the world, and then what's going to be happening on a hero's turn. But then it'll also say, like, hand this book to the Dungeon Master role, and they get to read about that. So they put that towards the end, so that way that person can have it, and the heroes can go into the book and not have to like skip parts because they don't want to have spoilers for how things are going to work. Because if you think about it, if you are a hero and you're a newer hero, because you're going to learn throughout the game how things work. If you're a newer hero, you're not going to know how a skeleton's going to attack or move around, or a goblin. You're going to really have to evaluate the situation that's going on, and then once you've done that before and figured out how to take them down, then you can use that information for in the future. But if you knew that going in, it's like, what's going on? And it would take away from the experience. So I appreciate that they had that intentionality and forethought. Now, something that's interesting about this, and that you don't really see in modern board games, especially dungeon crawl type. So behind me you have like Massive Darkness, you have Zombicide, and several other games that are all these dungeon crawl experiences. Those are really modular. So you're going to be able to set up the board in different ways, which also adds variability to your play experience. Now, HeroQuest didn't have that, and that's not really how games were being made in the late 80s, early 90s, and honestly, till closer to today. And sometimes some games that come out today still don't act like that. But they had a restriction, and that is that every map fits on this board. Now, there's different colors and things. The colors don't really matter, but what does matter are the different rooms, and if you notice, there's different hallways. And so when a character would walk around a corner, then the person who's playing the Dungeon Master-esque role will populate what that person can see around the corner. That may include putting things out like doors. So this game actually comes with doors, and yes, of course, there are also open doors, which are really cool. And so the Dungeon Master will populate what's all going on and what they can see. So the thing is that although there's this board, it doesn't mean that every one of those rooms is going to be used. And so players see this board with nothing on it except the room they start in, but it might be really restricted. It might only use 4. It might use the whole thing. So the players still don't know what experience they're going to have when they go, nor do they know which hallways are going to be open. And so it's going to be really nice. It's kind of fun to have that common board, but still be thinking like, what's going to happen when we go about this? Another thing with games from the time period, where they have very basic inserts. It's super just strict cardboard, but also they typically have some sort of like bigger thing that also helps explain the rules, similar to the inside of the box. And so what they did in this one is they have this insert, which has 2 different things on it. One is the armory, which outlines all the different weapons and armor and all the details about them, as well as what they cost. And the reason for that is after each adventure, you can go and visit the town and then upgrade things by getting new ones, or you might find something in a dungeon and want to reference it. Now, I already talked about how there's different versions of this game, and the UK version has the armory. Yeah, it has that here in a different way, but also they had cards. And so if you would like to, you can go on Board Game Geek, print those out, cut them out for yourself. And that's actually what I did, and I sleeved them so that way they'll be a little thicker. So I printed them on cardstock. I just found it really nice to be able to say, you have this longbow or you have this sword, and here it is, like here it is in your hand. I'll show you those here in a second. But also what it has is a reference of all the different tiles that are going to be in the game that could be coming up. And so it could be things like falling blocks. It could be pit traps. It could be a secret door. It could be the stairs that you're going to be using to get in. As well as a small picture of what all the different furniture is. So that way the players can reference, what is that? I mean, it looks like a bookshelf, but is it a bookshelf or is it something else? Typically it's always a bookshelf. But the different furniture, there's a lot of it. And so I'm going to show you that real quick. So the instructions that you saw on the lid were how to assemble these things. So here's that bookshelf. So it's a plastic piece on top with a little plastic skull that you'll put on right here. And then also a little plastic rat. But then the actual thing is cardboard. And so it's just an insert that goes in there. So this is punch board that you then fold around and you put it in here. Now it's not only the different bookshelves that are in here, but you also have things like the medieval rack, which they would, in a dungeon, if you think about it, makes sense that there's a rack because they would put people on here for like torture and stuff. Now, in no way condemning any of those things, not condemning, but saying that those things are okay. It's just like, given the time, given it's a dungeon, makes sense. But you also have the like the spell book with candles, which I think is really cool because it's even got like some wear on it. And so you can imagine if this is in a room, oh, this is the necromancer's lair where they're going to be casting different spells to bring these things like zombies and skeletons like to life, or to summon these demons, right? Okay, so then you also have, which is really cool, and I've used these in other games now, but little treasure boxes. You also just have little tables. You've got a fireplace. But then you also have things like a throne. And then you also have different things you can put out. So this is a weapons rack. Now, when you have the weapons rack out there, that you can search those things in a room. And so you can check, let me search the weapons rack. And the person who's playing the Dungeon Master role will tell you, hey, it's actually a whole bunch of rusty weapons. Looks like they're actually pretty worthless. Or you might find something really cool. So just because you're using these pieces in one scenario to another, or one room to another, doesn't mean it's going to be the same type of thing. You can also search the bookshelves. They might find something, might not. So it's all really, really cool. Okay, so who are you going to be doing this with if you are the hero? And by with, I mean the characters. And so what they did is it comes with 4 characters. And these are very much your standard Dungeons and Dragons tropes, especially of the time period. And so if you think about it, you've got the wizard, the dwarf, the elf, and the barbarian. So the fighter, and the others. And so I'm going to go and show you all of those real quick. So the wizard is this. So it talks about all their different stats on there. Has a really nice little miniature that goes with it, especially for the time period. On the back, it walks through all the different actions that you can take on your turn. And then for the dwarf, I like that they actually made it small. And so this is the dwarf. And so when my wife was playing, she played as the dwarf, and she named him McFirkin, and I'm going to be showing you her character sheet for him in a second. You also have the barbarian. And finally, you have the elf. Okay. And so I mentioned a second ago that there are character sheets. And so the game did come with, my copy did come with some original ones that are having that yellowing. So here's the original character sheet pad, which has a whole bunch that you can use for your campaign. But honestly, given the nature of this game and sometimes the rarity, I didn't want to use that because it also means a lot to have the original. And so I just went on Board Game Geek and printed some out and cut them out on on a sheet of paper and cut them out. And so this is the character sheet for McFirkin, my wife's character, when we did the first scenario, and she had that these are her stats, because the stats might change throughout the game, so you can write them in. She had a short sword. These are her body points to track, but then also gold, so you can accumulate gold, so you can purchase those items. But then she took it upon herself, and she actually drew out McFirkin between turns, and so this is her version of McFirkin. What's really nice about this is it evolved beyond just the character that you got, and she breathed life into it. Now, games don't just naturally do that. They have to be intentional. So all the things that are in this box, if you think about it, with the furniture and the cards and just that immersive storytelling that comes with it, that inspired her to do it. No one asked her to. She was called to do it in her own way, which was nice. Okay, so I've talked a lot about the monsters that come in the game, and so I want to show you some of those. In no way am I going to show you all of these because there's a lot. So you have things like the skeleton. And so some copies you might find of this, people have painted it. I am not ever going to paint these because I think they're cool as is, actually. And I've actually used them in other games, but I just like the fact of how they are. But again, a copy you might find out there might be painted, so just know that. But then you also have things like the goblins. Sorry, that's the orc. Because then here you have the goblin. You have the Firmier, the one that's really smart. You've also got the zombie, mummy type character. You've got some characters that can be used in different ways, and so like here you have this, in some cases it might be the sorcerer, in other cases it might be the commander, but yeah, that's him. But then you've also got just like standard warrior dudes who have a purpose. Piece of equipment that I didn't show before, but is the crypt, and so it might be guarded by some of these characters. And the character I talked about, who's just really cool and probably a favorite of many people, is the gargoyle. It's pretty legit. It's the only one in the game that came with instructions on the inside of that lid to actually be able to put the wings and things on. Just a really well-made character. These are pretty sturdy too, especially for the time. Now, I did say this game used dice. What I really like about it is, unlike games today that are plastic and things like that for the dice, which I get, like it's more consistent and it's cheaper to do, but there's just something about holding wooden dice. And these dice are filled in with a nice gold. But also, here are the dice that you use for combat and defense. So it's a one die fits all kind of mentality. So the symbols can represent defense, or they can represent hits, or super hits, which is nice. And that's the bunny. And I call it a bunny because there's some videos out there that you should go watch. One of them is the best thing about HeroQuest. If someone hasn't posted that video in the first 48 hours of this going out, in a comment, first of all, if you do, you get my kudos. But if no one's done that, I'm gonna put it there. Watch it, it's phenomenal. It's a lot of fun. I'm just trying to give you my version of everything. In no way trying to replicate him, because he does a phenomenal job with that. So you also have in here, and I've taken the liberty of sleeving all of the cards for this game because, again, it means a lot to me and I want to make it last. But you also have a whole bunch of tokens, so representing closed pathways, and I walked those through on the lid. And I told you that I made some equipment cards for this game, and so these are those. But again, you can just find these online, and so I made these cards for like a battle axe, and they all have these nice back on there. But if you get the UK version, these should already be included in your game. The broadsword, the chainmail. So it's actually just simple pictures of that different equipment with a description of it and what it does. And again, so you just put it next to you, next to your character sheet. I just find it makes the game a little bit more immersive than it already is. The game also includes, like, there's a bunch of cards. So the game comes with, I'm going to break these up real quick. Okay. There are monster cards, so the different monsters that you are populating. This is the backing on those. So it's cool old school art. But then it's got stats for when you put it out for other people to be able to see when they first finally see it, when that skeleton comes out. It's the same information that's on that screen that I've already shown you, but this is for the player reference. But they don't get to see this until you have the character out, and so they have to then learn how to navigate it on the fly. You've also got things in here. So if you're the wizard character or the elf, you get to choose from spell cards. And so there's a set of air spells, like being able to do a swift wind or some of the others. And I think that genie kind of just doing that is really cool. Or they can choose between fire spells, like actually casting a ball of flame, or do more of an earth approach and do things like pass through rock. So that way they can sneak into the room not using the main door. And finally, of course, there is the water spells, and you can do things like cast a veil of mist to hide yourself as you move. A couple other things that are in here in terms of the cards. And I told you that if you're the Dungeon Master character, your name is Zargon. Well, Zargon gets some spells too. He's a wizard. And so these are the chaos spells. And Zargon gets to choose a number of these depending on the situation, and gets to cast them. So in some situations, there are no cards from the chaos deck that you get to use. Other ones where you have like more of a spell casting creature or monster, then you would get to use these, of course. But you can actually like cast things like fear on the different players. Or a ball of flame, just like the other guys, or a lightning bolt, which kind of made me feel, when I actually did this one, made me feel kind of like the Emperor from Star Wars, of like casting lightning on the other players. Because of course I took on that Dungeon Master role, and the reason for that is because I don't always care about winning a game. I'm just going to put it out there. I care about the experience I'm getting to have with people and getting to have those aha moments for them and get to facilitate fun. Now, more modern games, so one of the games behind me on the shelf is Mansions of Madness. I have the second edition. The first edition had this same kind of thing with somebody playing all the monsters and populating it. That's a Cthulhu horror-based game. It's phenomenal. Definitely recommend checking it out. I'll probably be doing a video about that, so stay tuned. But the thing is that one person, there might not be somebody in your group who wants to like take one for the team, as some would put it. I mean, I had fun. I had a lot of fun being the Dungeon Master, but some people might not mesh with and might not make your group, right? And so what they do for that game, which people have talked about wanting to do for this game, if they can get the rights and publish it, they want to actually offload that responsibility onto an app. And that app will work the players through the dungeon, so that way all the actual living players get to have this experience together and really conquer it. The other thing that you have in here are artifacts. There's a lot of them. It's like finding a potion of healing, finding some gold, or the worst thing you can find in a dungeon, another wandering monster, which is going to pop out and immediately attack you. That's just awful. But hey, it's a press your luck element of, you know what, I'm going to search, because you have this giant deck of treasure. There's no way I'm going to pull that wandering monster card. Now here's the thing, as people pull more cards and like, ooh, I have oh, those are bad ones. I found jewels. I found jewels, yeah. And the next player goes, oh, I'm going to search too because it seems cool. Now, it's not dependent on the room. It's just like this deck gets used for all the rooms. Is they might pull it and check that same thing and then find a hazard. And they just either fell into a hole or had something happen, or even, where is it? The hazard of getting shot with an arrow. So maybe there was a hidden trap in the bottom of the thing and it shoots out. Now, what's nice about this is getting to pull these, and then if you pull it as the Dungeon Master for them, and then you can like paint the scene for them. Now, that's not something that all players do, but what I like doing is saying, I pull the card and say, hey, as you were searching searching that wall or searching that bookcase, little did you know that that one book that you're pulling to search behind made a hole open up below you, and you now fell into this hole. Or as you're leaning forward, you actually put too much pressure on this one stone, which activated an arrow to shoot out the wall, and now it's injected into your shoulder. What are you going to do? It's just kind of fun to do that, or to have some opportunities and just narrate the experience and add life into things. Now, beyond HeroQuest, I just think that that is a good thing to just do with players. Even if you're not that Dungeon Master role, you can really add a lot of value to the gaming experience by trying to relate what's going on in the game to the theme and like create a story. Our brains remember some really fun stories that we've had, and so if you're able to infuse elements of that or role play kind of what's going on, the whole table, if they really get into it, that game is going to live on in your memories for a long time. You might not remember who won or things like that, but you'll remember that person getting shot in the arm and then having a monster come up, and that's just going to create a vivid experience. And so whenever I'm in different gaming situations, I try and do that. A quick, easy way to do that is to, when you're playing cards in a game, is to actually tell them what you're doing. Don't just play your cards and say, okay, your turn. What did you just do? I have no idea what you just did. Like, a game is an interactive thing. Now, there's some players that do that because it's a really quick, everyone kind of knows the system and what's going on and the expectations. They do the action, super visible to everybody, move on to the next person. But there are some games where you're really focused down on your experience, and I encourage you just to maybe pull back a little bit. And if you're hoping to have a more immersive experience or want to breathe life into a game that's kind of just become routine, add some experiences into it. Create your own. Make your own fun. There's a couple books about game development and game design, and one of the things that many of them say is you can have these great games or great rule sets to create and curtail these experiences and kind of put people in a experience and immerse them, but it's the players who need to accept that social contract and lean in. And so I just encourage you, no matter what game you're playing, is to lean in a little bit, have fun. I think that's why this game stands out for so many people, because it's got so many different experiences with that quest book, but also having somebody get to create this experience for you, as well as you get to go explore and you don't know what's going to be around the corner. It's just a lot of fun. So if you see HeroQuest out there in the world, maybe you want to pick it up. I don't know. But if you're interested in learning more, let me know. I'll gladly reach out with you. Or if you want to ask me like, hey, are these like reasonable prices? I can just give you advice, because there's some things you might want to look for in the copies. The difference between the UK versus the US, as well as, just where you're finding that game or things to look for, because some people do take out the miniatures from this game, and so to make sure to do a count before you buy it. Just things to look out for. But all in all, I hope this video was helpful. I know it's a game that's going to be probably really hard for you to find, but I think it illuminates a lot of other things in gaming that we can learn from and that have really paved the way for some of the games that we have today. And so for that, I want to make this video just to give homage to it, as well as let you know about it and pull out some of the lessons we can learn from it. But all in all, if you enjoyed this, make sure to give it a like. Add your comments below on some things that you do to make your this is a video, to make your gaming experiences a little bit more fun for your players or more fun for you. And also, if you've ever played HeroQuest, let me know. I love having the different experiences with it. But again, if you like this video, please do like, share, and then also go over and check out the podcast, which is available on iTunes and other platforms. But really look forward to connecting and helping you and advancing the hobby by just being able to offer this input. And so I just hope you have a wonderful day and go out and make a positive impact on the world. Thanks.